Welcome. Let's talk about innocence, what it is, how it can support your practical daily life, how you can reclaim it in your life, and why it is key for spiritual awakening. I want to begin with a recent example from my own personal life. I had this interview coming up in the afternoon, and normally in the past, when having an interview, I would probably spend all day overthinking, worried about not finding the right words. But not this time, because my mind was completely occupied elsewhere. So that whole day and really all week and weeks before that, I had been spending in this state of heart opening. And for those of you who experience this, you will be able to relate when your heart opens truly to joy. To me, it feels like when you shake a bottle of champagne and then you open it and it just bubbles over. That is the joy that just bubbles from the heart abundantly, freely, and you just want to share it, really. There's no concern in the world. You don't really mind anything that's happening because you're walking around with those joy bubbles from your heart. And this was the state that I was in when I sat down for the interview. So I had been informed that there were these 3 different levels of commitment, and I was on the interview because they were now considering me for the 2nd level of commitment instead of the 1st. But the thing is, I wasn't really concerned about the result at all because I felt whole. I came into that interview just feeling complete in myself. And so either way would have been fine for me. I would have been happy with or without any kind of position. And that enabled me to just speak from my truth freely, to just share my joy freely. We had a wonderful time, and I ended up with signing the contract for the 3rd commitment level. And so that is something that can happen when we are aligned with the kind of work that is in front of us. Of course, if this work would not have been aligned, it would have gone the opposite way, right? When we're authentic, then things tend to fall away that are not for us. But when it is for us, then it is that state of innocence, living from that state of innocence, that makes things so much more smooth, so much more easy, without all that overthinking, without all that stress and struggle. So what I mean with innocence in this context is this pure allowance to just be with our experience exactly as it is, whether we feel joyful or sad, whether we need to speak up for truth of ourselves, or we just allow our words to flow, or even not speak at all. Anything that is in our experience, anything that just feels true to us, that just flows naturally to us without any resistance, letting go of that resistance and just existing in the moment, is what I will call innocence in this episode. Now, this power of innocence that we saw in my interview example is really nothing new to me. I've been looking back at all the different pivot points in my life. I've been pivoting quite majorly many times in my life. And one pattern is really clear. Every time that I made that pivot from a state of pure innocence, I didn't know how it would unfold, but I also didn't hold myself back because I just trusted that somehow things would unfold. I didn't try to control it. I didn't try to know. Those are the times when I have been so delightfully surprised by how magically things can unfold, things that weren't even in my imagination before, and how supported and nourished I can be along the way. And so those pivots that I made from a state of innocence have really led me to expansion in the direction of joy and ease. Whereas the pivots that I have made that have come from a place of doubt or a place of assumption of pain, those have resulted in a period of friction, emotional turmoil, and it has ultimately led me to grief of not being able to enter and live through that period of time from this state of innocence. And it is not something that I've been very conscious about when I've been living through it, and I absolutely believe that we need all of our experiences. So I'm not saying that it is wrong, I'm just saying that it is a pattern that I've seen, that the more innocence I brought into a new life phase, the easier it has been, and the smoother it has gone, and the more joyful it has been. So my perspective is that this innocence is at the core, is the deepest layer of healing in any area, any aspect of healing that we can do. So take sexuality, for example. I believe that we all are traumatized around sexuality to some extent, because it's so deep in our culture, it's so deep in our DNA, in our ancestral conditioning. And so recovering our sense of joy, of ecstasy, of bliss with our sexuality has so much to do with releasing all that shame conditioning, releasing all that has us believe that we're somehow wrong in our body, that sexuality is somehow wrong, and really deeply come to see, and it goes deeper and deeper and deeper as a rabbit hole, but really come to see that it is the purest form of love that we can show ourselves and each other as human beings. So recovering that innocence really is a key to recovering our most joyful state, whether it's about sexuality or anything else. And I'm well aware that I could give you many more examples of how innocence helps heal us. And some of you will still say, well, hang on, innocence is what got me into that abusive relationship and had me stay. Or innocence is what had me cause harm to another being when I didn't mean to. Like a child that doesn't know better may cause harm to another being. And so for all of us, to some degree, innocence is coupled to danger, whether that's conscious or subconscious. And we feel that it is our innocence that leads us into all this pain. And if this is you, know that I see you, I understand you. I have definitely hated my innocence for bringing me into so many situations with so much pain. And that pain is valid, and the more you heal, you come to see that it was never actually the fault of the innocence. For example, if we have endured an abusive relationship, then the problem we're really working with is our trauma, right? Our expectations of pain and our inability to set boundaries around that pain, because we would never afforded that possibility in our formative years or when the trauma occurred. And so what we need to do is decouple the innocence from that pain, from that trauma, and see that we can have the innocence and have an inner adult that guides us, that sets those boundaries that we need to have. And it's actually similar if you feel like the perpetrator in some way. If you look deeply enough at the source of it, there was probably at some point guidance that you never received that you would have needed to receive. And it did cause you pain. So in both cases, there is an expectation of pain from that original trauma or neglect or what it was you did or didn't receive. So when we're trying to heal and we are in denial about some hidden expectations of pain, they will show up in our external world through other people as mirrors. And if we can see that as our opportunity to learn what kind of hidden expectations of pain do I have and why do I have them, then we can begin to heal that by meeting our needs, by setting our boundaries, keeping our inner child safe. And that is the goal, to have that inner child feel so safe that it can express itself freely without having to overthink anything, without having to feel guilt for just existing or for expressing emotions. That is the goal, to have that parent be that safe support, that guidance, so that this part of us can just exist. And as we do this, we come to see that all of these hidden expectations of pain are a learned pattern, that your innocence is really your essence. It cannot be taken away from you, and it can be recovered by chiseling away all those walls that you built around it. Any fear that you have learned can be unlearned. So that begs the question, how do we unlearn those fears that keep us from embodying our innocence? And I don't think that there is a single simple answer. It is really the whole healing journey. I would say all of awakening is about recovering the sense of innocence and learning to fully live from it. That said, I will give you a few pointers today. First, intend that you want to explore your innocence, that you are ready to see and let go of those fear patterns and see things differently, that you're ready to support your inner child with self-acceptance and safe boundaries so that it can express itself freely, and that you're prepared to stop attacking your own innocence and embrace it instead. So intention is always the first step. Then, and I do say this specifically for innocence, realize that all fear patterns are based in your past. If you want to move into your innocence, then you have to let go of the past, because that is what innocence is. It is living completely in the present moment. And I know that this is not all that easy. After all, this is what I work with. So I will give you a few pointers as well, but sometimes it can be just enough to know this is not true right now. This is just the past. So to let go of the past, first of all, we need to be motivated. So try to see as clearly as you can what hold it has on you in the present, what it is doing for you now, how it is keeping you trapped. So this may involve all kinds of awareness exercises. It may be talking to people, it may be journaling, it may be imagining your life in 10 years from now if nothing changes, and what comes up as a resistance when you think about what it is you want. So if you're really in tune with your body, you feel your body, and then you think about what you would most want your life to be like, and you have some resistance coming up, then that resistance is where you need to begin to work. And then, as I always say, learning to allow every single emotion to flow freely and not hold on to them, which we probably all know by now is a lot easier said than done, because these feelings are often trapped in the body. So it is a somatic process of release as much as it is a cognitive process of inquiry, of trying to understand, of validating ourselves, of holding ourselves. And so these different aspects ideally need to work in tandem in a way that creates the most trust for our inner being. Another thing that I see as key to return to our sense of innocence is to work to remove the sense of importance. So really, if you don't place importance in things, then there is no need to compare to yourself, to other people, to where you've been, to where you're going. That is really the state of innocence, when there is no remorse, there is no worry about what could be. It is just accepting what is in this moment. So this removing importance is not just about those fear patterns that you've identified. It's really about anything and everything in your life. And of course, all these things that I mentioned are related. So when we have something that we fear, it automatically becomes important, right, for the body. And so it is a process over time to attenuate all these patterns. And that said, in my perspective, there is one realization, that if we realize that deeply enough in our being, then sometimes it can help us shift in an instant. And that realization is that these fear patterns, these pain patterns or expectations, as adults, they're based on thought, and that thought isn't necessarily true anymore. And sometimes it can take only a decision to say, this is not my reality anymore, this is not what I choose for myself. I choose to discontinue these thoughts and choose self-acceptance instead. And again, it takes a certain level of emotional integration before we can even have this idea. So it takes the emotional attenuation before we get there. But once we're there, it doesn't have to be perfect, okay? We can still have remnant reflections of pain around us and inside of us, and still choose and be firm on that choice, that my reality from now on is that I want to live in self-acceptance. My reality from now on is that I choose to not believe in these fears anymore. And even if they pop up again, I may have long periods where I do not feel the fear, and then they pop up again, and that's the healing cycle, then we're firm in that decision. This is not my reality, this is just a past reflection, and I can let it go. It is safe to let it go. It is important to have that as a tool, that not everything we see around us is our reality, because really everything we see in a way is a past reflection. And related to that, another really helpful practice is to give yourself a blank slate in every moment. So for example, let's say you're going through a moment of shame. Then yes, feel that shame. It's okay, allow it. It is there for you to witness it, so that it can heal, so that it can release from your body. And as soon as you've fully held that space, as soon as it has been fully held and accepted in your body, and when you feel ready, let it go. Give yourself a blank slate. Your past does not define you. If you need to do repair with some person, if that is the case, the reason that you're feeling the shame, then do the repair and then forgive yourself and let yourself move on. So every moment is and can be a new dawn, and don't be afraid to claim that. And talking about that, we also need to practice to give other people a blank slate. So relationships can only be harmonious. Love can only exist when I acknowledge that you can change too, and you deserve a blank slate in every moment too. Now this, of course, is a delicate skill to master, because I am not saying to allow abusive behavior to continue, to just forget that there was abusive behavior. Absolutely not. So this should be reserved to safe relationships where there is mutual accountability, where there is repair in case of conflict. And so we need enough boundaries, enough discrimination to see when a relationship is healthy enough for this practice of blank slate to apply, right? But given that relational safety, it is something we do need to practice, because no one is happier for us holding on, right? What makes us happier in a relationship is when we give each other that space of safety to inspire and encourage each other's innocence, and to speak up when it feels unsafe to do so. So I've been talking about innocence in the context of daily interactions, and I've already mentioned before a few things that play into what innocence is. So first of all, it is to be centered in your own being, in the present moment as much as possible. So I'm not worried about what other people will think about me when I express myself, or in general. I'm not worried about how things will work out. I'm not worried about if I have what it takes for things to work out. Really, it is just my heart telling me to take a certain action because it feels right and true to me, and that is enough. I trust my heart. I trust where it leads me. So with that trust in my heart, I can surrender the how. And the other part of living from innocence that I did mention is to approach every situation in life from this sense of completeness. So whether things go the way I imagine them or not, I know that it doesn't have to take away from my happiness. And once I am centered in my happiness, once I am feeling that overflow, right, I can bring that anywhere I go. And so if things do happen the way I imagine them, then I can receive it joyfully. And in my view, it is not a coincidence that these two ways of living are fundamental principles in our spiritual frameworks. So take Bhagavad-Gita, for example. One of the first things we learn is to not be so focused on the fruit of our actions, to surrender the fruit of our actions. And of course, that doesn't mean that it is wrong to enjoy the fruit of our labor. What it means is that the real joy lives in the moment, in the actions we take on our journey to get there, right? So it's not about these socially acceptable moments of celebration, of accomplishment. It is really in every single action we take in order to experience something in the whole exploration journey. And so how do we get to that point of enjoying every moment? Well, that is to give that space for our innocence, because our innocence is our channel. You could say it's our birthplace of our innate joy and also of our love. And I would go even further and say that once that channel is open, it is also a channel for the living truth as it lives through us. So it is not just about authenticity as a human being, it's really about intimacy, about the connection with that blade of grass or that cosmos. So all the intimacy that we can experience is through that channel of our own innocence. So please don't hate your innocence, and where you feel it may have led you, remember that your inner child is innocent, and that is a beautiful thing. Work towards accepting all the lessons, yes, and keep any boundaries you need to keep in order for your inner child to feel safe to express themselves freely. And remember that your joy and your inner child really are inseparable. You cannot have one without the other. So to the extent that you can, let them out, let them play freely, let them be alive in the moments that is your life. Let them show you what their joy is like. I hope that this episode has helped inspire you in some way. If you have any comments, if you have any questions or insights, please share them below. I always love when we can share our wisdom. And I am so grateful that you've tuned in with me today. And I wish you a joyful and beautiful day. Namaste.